So why bring your business to Canada? When does Canada make sense when a business wants to internationalize? Well, there's 2 false positives and 3 reasons why it does make sense to come to Canada. Check the link in the description of this video, okay? We help businesses of different sizes at different stages in this journey to build a success in Canada. But let's get to it. False positive is when we have the impression that something is true, but in reality it is not. So there are 2 false positives here. So what they are. So the first one is when we have a purely commercial interest just looking to sell in Canada. Here are the challenges, right? The Canadian market, in terms of number of people, it's not a giant market. It's a good size, about 40 million people, but it's not a giant market. Canadians, in order to buy from anybody, they want to feel that you're part of the community. So there's a need for relationship building. Also, there are relatively long conversion times. So it takes a while until a Canadian decides to buy from anybody. So the second false positive is when somebody wants to immigrate to Canada and says, oh, okay, they have all these programs for immigration in a business category, so all I have to do is to create a business and then I can move to Canada. Have to be careful with that, because this path about immigrating to Canada as a business person, the business, first and foremost, the business needs to make sense. The business plan needs to be well structured. The business needs to generate money down the road, right? In both cases, when somebody wants to sell in Canada for purely commercial interest, or when somebody purely wants to immigrate to Canada, in both cases, there are other ways that are cheaper, faster, and easier without the need to actually create a business in Canada. So if you want to sell to Canadians and that's it, well, you can find a distributor, a local representative that will represent your company without you having to open a Canadian office, without having to be present here. And if you want to immigrate to Canada, there are certain very clear ways that you can come to Canada without needing to create a business here, because it may cause the impression that, oh, if I have a business, it's easier because there's this type of visa or that type of visa. There's always something in that path that you can, oh, but hang on a second, I need to demonstrate the funds. Oh, hang on a second, I need to actually now generate money with this business plan. Anyways, so when does it make sense though? I talked about the 2 false positives. Let's talk about when it's a true positive, when a business really comes to Canada and generates results that is good for everybody. The first reason to come to Canada is access to markets. And it's very important here. It's not only access to the Canadian market, it's access to markets. So the first thing is Canada, it's a highly diverse country. There are people here in Canada that came from all over the world. It's a giant number of languages and cultures, and actually first generations. 52% of the population of Toronto was born outside of Canada. So what does that mean? When you're bringing a business to Canada, it means that you have micro markets that you can test what you do to do your pilots. So you can test if what you do, it's gonna work in an American market, it's gonna work in a European market, in a lot of other foreign markets in Asia and Latin America, because you have these pools of immigrants here that kind of mimic characteristics of markets from all over the world. Then of course, if you have your pilot and things work, and from your Canadian company you can sell to the United States, because Canada, United States, and Mexico have this North American agreement. It's relatively easy, low bureaucracy. You're always competing fiercely on the commercial side, but in terms of having the bureaucracy set up to be able to commercialize and having favorable tax treatments and favorable financial flows and ease of moving money around, that's all very easy to sell in the US and to sell in the European Union. In addition to these 2 very large wealthy markets, US and Europe, you have trade agreements that Canada has with all over the G7 countries. Is the only G7 country from which you can sell to all the other 6 without barriers, without tariffs, for example. A lot of Latin American countries have bilateral trade agreements with Canada. So much easier to access markets in Latin America, sometimes even compared to if you are, for example, in Mexico and you want to sell to Chile, sometimes it's easier to do that from a Canadian company because Canada has trade agreements, for example, all over Latin America with Chile, Colombia, Peru, all over the Caribbean, Central America, and all that. Same thing for Africa. Canada has trade agreements, preferential treatment with a lot of African countries, Asian, Caribbean, in the Middle East, you name it. So Canada is a great base for you to create your international hub to access markets. So again, that's the number one reason why building a business in Canada makes sense, is to access markets all over the world. Reason number two is innovation. That's why we have a disproportional amount of the businesses that come to Canada. They are all in the innovation space. Not necessarily just software companies, but like everybody where what you sell, it has a strong base of your intellectual property, of your innovation, of your differentiated product. And there's three reasons for that, why Canada is a great place. First, Canada is a great place for talent. Not only homegrown talent with great universities where 65% of the population has a post-secondary degree. So Canada, people study a lot and at good schools, but also Canada attracts talent from all over the world. People highly educated from everywhere end up coming here because the immigration systems in Canada give more points for people that are more technically specialized. So talent is great here. Second thing, very easy bureaucracy. It's very easy to conduct your innovation here. There's not much red tape. There is great collaboration between government, universities, businesses, startups, larger corporations. So there's a very good ecosystem. And there's funding, there's money. The government of Canada and many other institutions actually finance in many cases with like you don't have to repay. These are grants. These are not necessarily loans that you have to repay back, but you need to have a solid idea, a solid plan how you're going to execute that. And there's, I think the number is like over 1,000 innovation incentive programs in Canada that companies benefit from every single day to generate new technologies, new products, new services, innovation. So with great talent, with very easy bureaucracy, and with a lot of money. So these are the three reasons why our number two here is innovation. Second, a biggest reason why people come to Canada with their businesses. The third reason is branding, right? Because Canada is seen all over the world as a reliable, competent, and nice people, right? So perhaps what ends up happening, even better profit margins in your current market. I certainly know my country of origin, companies that have come from there to Canada. After they're in Canada, even back home, people start to see them as a higher grade with better quality now, and even they're able to get better profit margins in the sales that they even make in their country of origin. Of course, you can enter new markets in terms of this third benefit, which is branding. Suddenly people, well, but where are you coming from? There's certainly prejudice depending where the company is based on, depending where you're selling. People look with suspicion. They don't expect certain high quality to come from certain places, unfortunately, but true. And that goes away when you have your base in Canada, because people look at you and say, oh, okay, they must be technically competent, they're reliable, they must be competent, and they're certainly nice to deal with. So that makes it possible to access new types of clients and new geographies that perhaps had a little bit of prejudice before. Another reason on the branding side is even internal. I heard many cases over the years that when a business, especially from an emerging country, decides to open a Canadian office, they start to get resumes from people even in their home country, because there's a big immigration flow. 500,000 new people come to Canada every year, and many of these are highly talented technical people that work somewhere. So if they see, oh, this company here from my home country, they also have offices in Canada, they send their resumes to you, right? So there is an attraction and retention of talent component to this branding thing. It benefits the company internally. You don't lose good people and you attract good people. And finally, there's also valuation reasons, because a presence in Canada, especially when we go to reason number one, which is access to markets, investors start to look at your company and say, hey, these guys have bigger plans. They can have bigger penetration to wealthier markets with better profit margins. So even having a better return for your investments may be very helpful. And these are the three top reasons then why it makes sense for a business to come to Canada: to access markets, to innovate, and to boost your branding. Click on the link on the description here in this video and learn more about how we can help. Thank you very much.